So now we've looked at 2D linear transformations. Let's look at that in a little bit of an interesting way. Here's my equation. We know how to look at that. Of course, we basically talked about that. Now, a simple way to do would be is, in this case, I can come up with 4 parameters. And sometimes, for example, A could be the scale, and Y and D could be the scale. For example, the numbers negative kind of give it a flip versus not. And similarly, things like C and B kind of give you the shear information. And again, mixtures of this with sines and cosines tell us how to do rotations. So one interesting to note is all of this means is we are only look at linear combinations of these parameters to generate a newer set of x and y's given an x and y. So x and y, x prime, y prime are computed knowing what x and y are, and again, if I know the parameters a, b, c, d. Let's look at some of the features or the kind of the details of what these types of things provide. They can be used to generate scaling of images, rotation of images, shear, and of course also mirroring. We've looked at all of them so far. Now let's look at some properties of these linear transformations. One thing to note is all of the time the origin still remains where it is at 0, 0. We haven't actually done so far any translation, for example, right? I gave you these examples of looking at these matrices where we just played around with how to change them to do scaling, rotation, shear, scale. We haven't actually done translation, so origin remains where it is always. Second thing to note in all of this would be that lines would actually generate lines again. So if the image had a line, the same straight line would actually be generated in the new image, even with scaling. Of course, it might look different in terms of it might be stretched because we may have stretched the image more in Y and less in X or something like that. Or it might get flipped when I do the mirror, but it still appear as a straight line. All parallel lines, because of the fact that everything is straight line, will also appear as a parallel in the new image. And all ratios would actually be preserved as much as possible on that image.